Ho, ho, ho! Or should I say, ha, ha, ha! Welcome, everybody, to Dulcimerica. My name is Bing Futch. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to you. I'm in the spirit, as you can tell, and I'm here to welcome you to DAD December. Remember, last month was Novice November, and I couldn't come up with a skill level and the month, but I told you last month we'd be focusing on DAD for a couple of episodes here, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And this is going to be considering that maybe you are a novice beginner and exploring DAD tuning. It might also be for those of you who are sort of moving forward in the intermediate realm and getting a better idea about what this tuning has to offer. We'll cover all of that in this episode and the continuing episode that'll debut next week after Christmas. Thank you, everybody, for joining me once again very, very much. Before we get into this, I want to say thank you to one of my patrons, in particular, Libby Lester. A very special shout out, Libby. I want to thank you very much for becoming a patron. I appreciate you on a daily basis because what you're doing is helping me to produce things like Dulcimerica, new books, new recordings, new tablature, new musical resources that I can teach to other people. You are definitely a part of the art and a part of the magic, and Libby, I want to thank you so very, very much. All my patrons contribute in some way every single month, and they get everything I've ever done on Patreon. If you're really interested to find out what this is all about, you can go to this little link down here, which I do suggest you do because I've got all kinds of materials that'll go along with this exercise in this episode and show you a little bit more in depth about what I'm trying to explain here. So go to this link right on down here, and while you're over there and downloading everything, make sure you check out the open house tag. That's going to take you to all of the free stuff I've posted over the past 5 years, and that includes music, CDs, books, all kinds of stuff that'll help you, hopefully, to become a better mountain dulcimer player. And if you like what you see over there, please do consider becoming a patron like Libby. Thank you, everybody, very much. I really do appreciate you. All right, so last month we were in DAA tuning. And at some point in time here, I will be getting into the different modes and why we tune into the different tuning configurations that we do. But right now, we're just going to say that we're moving from DAA tuning, a traditional mountain dulcimer tuning, into DAD, which you would call maybe a modern tuning for mountain dulcimer, even though you can use any of the tunings in a modern setting. This is the one that I think a lot of people enjoy the most. I have my suspicions, and I talk to a lot of people about why they like elements of this tuning. And DAD, first of all, is a symmetrical tuning. D on the bass string, A on the middle string, and D on the melody string. So we've got D on the bass and on the melody on the outside of this trio of strings, and then an A on the middle. The first thing that's going to do for us, it's going to enable us to take chords and invert them, flip them over to get a different sound from the same chord. And that's real helpful. And I know a lot of people who first started getting into the mountain dulcimer in the late 50s, the 60s, the early 70s, were trying to find a way to play more sophisticated music on the instrument. And this setup, this configuration of tuning was helping them do that. And they're still being helped today by this particular tuning. Also, having the melody string be different, a fourth, an interval of a fourth away from the middle string, enables us to do a lot of continuation of melody. So it's very easy for us to walk across the strings and play 6 notes within a 3-fret period, as opposed to having to run all the way down 6 frets like this. You can do the same thing coming from the bass string to the middle string. The interval then is a 5th, and we can do it like this. So being able to walk across the strings and play melody as opposed to running up and down the fretboard is another huge plus to having this wonderful tuning, DAD. So let's get into it by looking at, first of all, what notes we have available. And I'm going to put this chart up on the screen right now. Once again, all of the things you're about to see, you can download from my Patreon page, and the link is right below on the screen, and also it'll be in the video description itself. So this is a note location chart for DAD. Notice it says tuning, DAD, just 3 letters, all capitalized, or lowercase dd, that stands for the double melody string, then the A for the middle string, and then D for the bass string. A lot of people like to see that particular tuning because they know which one's the middle string, which one's the melody string, which one is the bass string. It makes it a lot easier to see. But typically when you see just the 3 note names, that means we're coming from the bass string, then to the middle string, and then finally to the melody string when you call out those numbers. So if I call out a 2, 3, 4, I'm talking about 2 on the bass string, 3 on the middle string, and 4 on the melody string. And of course, those are the fret numbers that we're talking about. Right next to that, you'll also see 1, 5, 8. Those are the scale degrees of the note names that we're tuned to. 1 being D, the first note of the D major scale, 5 being A, the 5th note of the D major scale, and 8 being an octave. That's 8 notes above the root of the scale. So we've got D for 1, 5 is A, and 8 is the D an octave above the D that we begin with on the bass string. Next, you'll see the mode, which is mixolydian. A lot of people think that because we're tuned in DAD, that means we're actually playing a mixolydian tuning, but that's not necessarily the case. If you don't use any of the extra frets that we use on the mountain dulcimer, like the 6.5 or the 1.5, then yes, if you play that flatted 7th note, you will be playing in mixolydian mode. But if you're playing a straight major scale with all the notes where they should be, then you're actually not playing in mixolydian. You're just using the tuning that happened as a result of it. So once again, if that is a little confusing, we'll talk about modes early part of next year and on something else that I'll be sharing with you here in a little bit. So there we have all of our note placement. Look all up and down the fretboard there and you'll see all of those notes and what notes we have available to us and what we can use. The mountain dulcimer, even with the extra frets, if we just don't count the extra frets, is still purely a diatonic instrument. And what diatonic means is we've got a 7-note scale for every single key that we play in, and that those notes that are in that scale are the only notes that we're going to be using. They are all there clustered together in the service of a particular key. And so we are mainly a diatonic instrument. We're stuck in one key or another. The extra frets give us the ability to step outside of that every now and again. So let's take a look now just below that, and you will see what the actual mixolydian scale looks like. Starting from open, you see we go open on the melody string, then we go to the 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret, 5th fret, 6th fret, and then finally the 7th fret. So the mixolydian mode is basically a particular flavor of scale. And this one sounds just like the major scale except for the 7th note, which is down a half step. It's been flattened for the mode. So when people started enjoying this whole DAD thing, they discovered that they could go ahead and raise that note back up to make a normal major scale by adding the 6.5 fret. So we can raise the C natural in this scale to C sharp and have a proper major scale. So instead of playing the 6th fret, we'll skip the 6th fret and play the 6.5 fret. That'll give us C sharp and the scale will sound major. Here we go. Open, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, and 7, the octave from where we began. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to the very next page in your resources, and this is going to be your true major and minor scales for the key of D. A lot of people think that mountain dulcimer is stuck in D major all the time, but actually we can play in 6 different keys when we're in DAD tuning. We can play in the key of G, D, and A. Those are 3 major keys. And we can play in the relative minors of those 3 keys, which would be E minor, B minor, and F sharp minor, for a total of 6 keys. We can fake it in a lot of other keys, but sometimes we don't have all the notes or we don't have all the chords, but we can get by with a few handily used tricks. But right now I'm going to show you the major and minor scales, because if you know these scales, you're really going to become a lot more fluid on your mountain dulcimer, and it's a great way of learning what notes you actually have at your disposal. So let's start off with the G major scale. G major key has just one sharp in it, and that sharp is F sharp. We'll start that scale from the 3rd fret on the bass string, and then play 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the bass string. And then, courtesy of this wonderfully symmetrical setup we have with this tuning, we're going to play the exact same notes, 3, 4, 5, 6, the same frets rather, 3, 4, 5, 6, on the middle string 3, 4, 5, 6. By doing so, we will have all of the notes of the G major scale. So let's go ahead and start from the 3rd fret here. That's G. Then we go up to the 4th fret. That's A. 5th fret, B. 6th fret is C. Now we'll play those same 4 frets on the middle string. Back to the 3rd fret. There's our D. 4th fret gives us E. 5th fret gives us that 1 sharp, F sharp. And 6th fret gives us our G octave. Same note, just a different pitch. One is low, and one is 8 note higher. Let's go ahead and play the G major scale again. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. All right. Now, before we go any further with the minor stuff, I want to go through all of the major scales first, because there's a real cool trick that is involved with this. So let's go ahead and move on to the D scale, D major. The D major scale, we're in the key of D. That means we now have 2 sharps. We had F sharp to begin with from the key of G. Now we're adding to that C sharp. Very important to know, because in the key of G, you're going to play a C natural because there's only 1 sharp, and that's F sharp. But when we get in the key of D, we're going to want to play a C sharp, not a C natural, because the C is sharpened in the key of D. That'll help you to remember, hopefully, so that when you're playing in the jam or just kind of noodling on your instrument, you don't accidentally or mistakenly hit C natural when you're playing in the key of D. You'll actually go to the 6.5 fret and play C sharp instead, and avoid the 6th fret for that scale. So for this, we're going to start from open on the bass string and play frets 1, 2, and 3. Open 1, 2, and 3 on the bass string, and then open 1, 2, and 3 on the middle string, starting with D on the bass string like this. D. 1st fret, E. 2nd fret, F sharp. 3rd fret, G. Then the middle string, open A. 1st fret, B. 2nd fret, C sharp. And finally D at the 3rd fret on the middle string, an octave above the bass open. So just to look back a bit, we have G major, that's going to be 1 sharp, and that is F sharp. And then D major is going to include F sharp as well as a new sharp, that is C sharp. Now keep those in mind, because we're going to the A major scale. A major has 3 sharps. Let me see if you can guess what those first 2 sharps are. That's right, F sharp and C sharp. We're adding G sharp to the mix. And in your first octave, from open to the 7th fret, you've got 1 G sharp. It's at the 6.5 fret on the middle string. So just take a moment and remember that's where that's located, because you're going to need that when you're playing in the key of A. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from the 4th fret on the bass string, and we're going to play frets 4, 5, 6.5, and 7. Notice we didn't go all of the frets in a row like we've been doing. And why is that? Because the 6th fret has got a C natural, and that's not in the key of A, so we don't want to use it. Also, as we go up the middle string and do 4, 5, 6.5, 7, the 6th fret has got G natural, and the A major scale calls for a G sharp. So when we're playing in the key of A, the big thing to remember is not to use the 6th fret unless you're playing an altered version of A, like a mixolydian A or an A minor or something like that. Let's go ahead and play the A major scale starting from the 4th fret on the bass string. Here we go with A, B, C sharp, D at the octave 7th fret. Coming back over to the middle string at the 4th fret, we've got E. Going to the 5th fret, F sharp. Going to the 6.5 fret, G sharp. And finally at the octave mark 7th fret, there is A, an octave above the A at the 4th fret on the bass string. So there we have the 3 major scales that we can play for the major keys that we can play in. We've got G with 1 sharp, and that's F sharp. We've got D, and that is 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. And then we've got A, which is 3 sharps, and that is F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. So let me talk to you here just a little bit about the relative minor. Every single major key has a relative minor key that's associated with it. And what they share, get this, they share the exact same key signature, the exact same number of sharps or flats on the staff, and they also share the exact same notes. So what's different between the major and the relative minor? What's different is the place from which we start the scale. If we start the scale from the root of the major scale, we're going to get the major scale. Let's use G as an example. Actually, let's use D major as an example. So if I play from open D and then walk my way up, I'm going to get a D major scale. The relative minor scale begins on the 6th note of every major scale, the 6th note. And then it uses the exact same notes as that major scale, but instead of starting at note number 1, it starts at note number 6, and it goes from that note to its octave. So let's take a look at, first of all, what is the 6th note of the D major scale? Going from open, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, so that's 6, right there where the B is located. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the scale from B, from the 6th scale degree, from the 6th note, using the exact same notes that are in the scale for D major. But listen to what happens to the quality of the scale, starting from B. Hey, what are you trying to pull? What kind of a magic trick is that? Nothing up my sleeve, because I'm not wearing sleeves. No, what happened there is we started from a different point in the scale. Every scale that we play is made up of a combination of whole steps and half steps, and it's not a symmetrical setup. So it kind of goes like for a major scale, whole step, half step. Whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So it's got these weird little half step intervals that come in there. So if you start from a different location, and let me back it up for a second, if you play all half steps on a chromatic scale, it's pretty much always going to sound the same no matter where you start. It's all going to be half steps. But because we've got a combination of whole steps and half steps in our 7-note scales, if we start from a different location, the intervals at which we reach each of the notes in the scale and the distances between them changes how we perceive the sound of those notes when they're played together. And that's what gives us these different characters, different flavors of scales. In fact, the 7 different modes are just a C major scale played from a different scale degree each time. One time from the first note of the scale, going from root to octave. One time from the second note of the scale, from root to octave. One time from the third note of the scale, root to octave. Every single time you do that, every single time you start from a different point in the scale will sound different because of the relationship between the whole steps and the half steps. We will get deeper into that down the road in a little bit, I promise. It also has been covered in past episodes of Dulcimerica. So let me do that again. I'm going to play a 2-octave D major scale, and then once again start from the 6th fret so that you can hear how it lives in the middle of these 2 octaves. Here we go. Okay, that is obviously a major scale through and through, all the way up. Now I'll start from the 6th note of the scale, B, and listen to what happens to that scale. It's living right there in the middle of the major scale for you. So we're going to start from the 6th note of our major scale, and that's going to give us the notes of the relative minor. In this case, the B minor scale starts with B. It goes to C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G, A, and then we end with B. Same exact notes as the D major scale, just we start from the 6th note as opposed to the 1st note or the root note. So let's take a look at all of our minor scales for what we've got, G, D, and A. First, let's look at the G major scale and what that 6th note is. So we'll go G, A, B, C, D, E. E is the 6th note of the G major scale, which means that we are now going to be playing an E minor scale. And E minor is the relative minor to G major. G and E minor both have 1 sharp, F sharp. G and E minor both have these notes, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. But one starts on G and goes to G, and one starts on E and goes to E. Other than that, they are completely the same. So take a look at the measures 3 and 4, and let's go ahead and play the E minor scale. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. It sounds a lot different than the major scale. And once you get used to hearing how it sounds, then you'll have no problem picking it out and using it when you are playing in other situations. All right, let's go to D major, and we are going to play a different path for the B minor scale, starting from measure 7 and going into measure 8. Let's go ahead and play the B minor scale. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so I started that off the same way I started it the last time, but instead of going all the way up to 6 and then coming over, I actually went over to 1 on the melody string and then walked up from there. There are a number of different alternative ways to play a lot of different things on the mountain dulcimer, but I wanted to show you a nice easy pattern for that, and there it is right there for you. Going up to A major now, let's look at the 6th note of the A major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is F sharp. So F sharp is the starting point for the F sharp minor scale, and F sharp minor is the relative minor to the A major scale. Let's go ahead and take a look at measures 11 and 12 and play the F sharp minor scale. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So what I'd like to see you do with these 6 scales is to, if nothing else, just focus on the major scales, and as you play each one of those, say the note out loud. If you need to have that note location chart there, go ahead and have the note location chart out and ready, and just take as much time as you need to. The more you do it, the more you'll actually cement those notes in your head for this tuning, And then that'll help you down the road when you start building chords and composing and trying to figure out your own arrangements for some of your favorite tunes. Play with those, and then if you feel real comfortable, go ahead and start messing around with those minor scales as well. There's a lot of other fun things to know about the relative scales, and once again, we'll talk about that in the coming year. Go ahead and move on to the third page. We're going to jump in and do this a little backwards. We're going to get into some chords here. Whenever you get into a brand new tuning, what you want to do is just kind of get a feel for what you have to do to play these full-throated chords. Anytime you change the tuning, you're going to have to figure it all out over again. But we're going to jump right in and just start playing tablature and messing around with moving with these new string configuration, this new tuning that we've got set up. So this is an exercise I call smooth as folk, and we're just going to kind of move through, and then we'll get into finding out what some of these chords are, and also another arrangement that'll help us move some of the chords around. Here we go. Smooth as folk, nice and slow. Number one, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, there it is. So there's a lot of kind of fun stuff going on there, and that's just sort of an exercise you can do to move around some of these easier chords where you don't have to do a lot of touching of the bass string. They're 2-finger chords. You can just work with the melody string and the middle string and get used to mixing them around, but you also get some really lovely textures and some colors there. So practice that, play around with it, and we'll move on to our next section here. We'll be getting deeper into building of these chords and naming of them in part 2 of this episode. So go ahead and take out the very final of the resource pack. This is going to include our DAD chords, and it's also going to include a little piece called Mance Moderno, which is me just sort of messing around with chord movement inversions, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. So let's take a look at the DAD chords. And once again, if you have just jumped into this episode for some reason and missed the beginning, make sure you go to this link down below to pick up, download your resources for this so you can have eyes on them. Even though I'm putting them on the screen, it's very nice to have it in front of your face where you can work with it at your own speed. Okay, so DAD chords. So I talked about scale degrees and how every single note of the scale is assigned a number, 1 through 7. So we play 8 notes in a scale because we end up playing the first note, or the root note, twice. We play it at the beginning of the scale to start things off, and then we play it at the very top of the scale to finish things off. And that note at the top is the same as the note at the bottom, except that it is pitched 8 notes higher. It's the exact same note, but it is pitched 8 notes higher. For every single one of those notes, we can play a chord. So that gives us 7 chords that are diatonic. They are native to that particular key. And if you learn what those chords are for D, then you are going to be a master of being able to play no matter what the tune is. You'll be able to play and follow along. So there's a little thing that happens. If you build chords off the first, 4th, and 5th notes of the scale, you'll get what we call primary triads. These are the major chords, all of the major up and happy chords. If you build chords off of the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th notes of the major scale, any major scale, you will get the secondary or auxiliary, or there's a lot of different words for them. Basically, the secondary triads, these are your minor chords. You'll get 3 minor chords, 3 major chords. And if you build off of the 7th scale degree, you'll get what's called a diminished chord. It's a quizzical sounding thing that once you first start messing with it, you won't be sure how to react to it. But once you understand how it works, you'll find yourself using it all the time. And it's a wonderful little gift in our scale and chord package. So if you look at the DAD chords down below, you'll notice that we indeed have a number of chords, and that for the most part, every single one of those is based off of one of these scale degrees. We've got D major, we've got E minor, F sharp minor, G major, A major, B minor, and C sharp diminished. So we have all 7 of those chords accounted for. I've also added C major at the end of that, because even if you don't have extra frets, you can still play C major, and C major will come cropping up, just sneaking on you in tunes, even though they are played in the key of D. So it's a good thing to know how to play a C major chord. So let's go ahead and take a look at D major to begin with. We're going to start off with 002. That is a great way to play a chord. It's an L-shaped chord. I don't have to fret bass or middle string, but I'm anchoring that F sharp right there at the 2nd fret. Nice full D major chord. 2, 3, 4 in our slant shape. We'll be getting into the chord shapes in the next episode here. 4, 5, 7 for our extended slant shape. And so there you've got these wonderful chords. Now, each of these chords can be inverted. That means we can literally flip them over so that they are a mirror image of themselves. So 002 becomes 200. And 234 becomes 432. And 457 becomes 754. Again, these are the same chords, all of them. All of those are D major chords. All of those hold 3 notes, D, F sharp, and A. But they sound different because sometimes the pitches are higher, sometimes the pitches are lower, sometimes the root's on the bottom, sometimes the middle note is on the bottom, sometimes the top note is on the bottom. And there's all these different ways to sort of play around with these 3 individual notes, and that is where things get really, really super interesting. Let's go ahead and move on to E minor. We've got 1, 1, 3 in an L shape. We've got 3, 4, 5 in a slant. And we've got 5, 6, 8 in an extended slant. Moving on to F sharp minor, we've got 2, 2, 4 in the L shape. We've got 6.5, 5, 4 in the extended slant shape. And we've got 6.5, 7, 9, 6.5, 7, 8, sorry, 6.5, 7, 9. And that is another F sharp minor for you extended slant. Moving on to G major, we've got 3, 1, 0. That is an extended slant. Even though we're not fretting the melody string, it counts. We got 3, 3, 5 L shape. We got 5, 6, 7 slant. A major 101. I'd like to mention that this is not a full A major chord. A full A major chord would be A, C sharp, and E. And what we are playing here is just E on the bass string and on the melody string, and A on the middle string. We're missing the major third, the C sharp in the middle of that. So what this is actually called is a root 5 chord. You would write this A5, and it just doesn't have a third in the middle of it. So it can be used for A just fine, but you are missing a note. It is the easiest A to play, and the reason people love 101 is because they hate 1, 2, 4, and that's the next chord shape here, an extended slant. You need a big reach to get your 1, 2, 4 and your 4, 2, 1. Finally, an L shape, 4, 4, 6.5 for A major. B minor, we've got 2, 1, 0. That's going to be a slant shape. We got 2, 3, 5 for an extended slant, and 5, 5, 7 for an L shape. Now the C sharp diminished, because it is a little weird and it has different intervals than any other chord that we've got. The C sharp diminished can only be inverted. There's not so much you can do to revoice it because it's a weird chord. But you play it 6 1/2, 6 8, and you can flip that around for a different sound altogether. Those are the 7 diatonic chords you're going to find in the key of D. Now, let's also take a look at C major, because sometimes you're going to want to use C major even though you're playing in the key of D, especially if you're playing a mixolydian tune. As I mentioned before, the mixolydian scale or mode has a flatted 7th degree. So the melody included would be C natural, which means tunes like Old Joe Clark are mixolydian tunes. Not only do they have melodies that use the flat 7th note, but they also have chords that are built off of the flatted 7th. So instead of playing a C sharp major chord, we play a C major chord. And if you don't have a 1 1/2 fret, you can still do this by playing 3, 4, 6. C, E, and G are all right there for you. In an extended slant shape, we can also flip that over for a different voicing. And one that's not written down there is 6, 6, 8. That's an L-shaped C major chord. 6, 6, 8, and you can invert that as well. If you do have a 1 1/2 fret, there's a wonderfully rich low C major chord that you can play down here. That is a slant shape, 3, 1 1/2, and 1. Oh, that sounds so good. And there you've got the ability to play C major down there as well. So that is all of the chord. Those are all of the chords. That are all of the chords you're going to find in the key of D. And you can flip these around and voice them differently. And the more you get used to seeing those numbers stacked, the easier it'll be for you when you start trying to play through things up to speed. I gotta tell you, and it was so lovely. I actually saw Dave and Kim Lippy last month at the Sewanee Dulcimer retreat. Hi guys. And I had not seen them in many, 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 many years. They used to head up the Orlando area Dulcimer group that I joined when I first started playing with Dulcimer people. And I didn't read tablature. I was all self-taught. And so when I saw these stacks of numbers, 2, 3, 4, and 4, 4, 6 1/2, it just put a halt on everything I was doing. I'd look down at the fretboard, I'd look at the page, I'd try and figure it out. But once I got used to seeing those numbers right off the bat, things got a little easier, and I was able to proceed without a whole bunch of caution. So this is a good practice for you to start getting used to seeing those numbers and knowing what they represent as they come up in the music. The final thing here in the worksheet is Mance moderno. And this is basically something I composed just to get you used to moving these chord shapes around the fretboard. So I got a combination of root inversion or root position chords, and I've also got some first position inversions, and I got some second position inversions, and other weirdness. The point of this exercise is not to go through and play it real quick. It's to study very slowly, take your time, and plot your way across the fretboard. What fingers are you going to use? How can you keep your fingers on those strings as long as possible to facilitate the sustain and the legato feeling, the notes right next to each other that you want in order to avoid chop when you're playing. So we're going to play Mance moderno nice and slow. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next line down. All right. So again, just take your time, plan through that, and just get used to using different groupings of fingers. If you're finding a hard time switching out to get to a different location, especially when you're doing big moves between one direction where the finger, your thumb, is going to be on the melody string closest to the bridge, but sometimes your chord shape's going to have the thumb on the bass string and it's closest to the bridge over there. And so that shift with the wrist that is required is going to take some practice as well. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the easier it gets, the more fun it is. So hopefully you'll practice this nice and slow and go back over everything we talked about in this episode, because the final episode of the year, we're going to wrap things up and give you even more food for thought and some more practice things and stuff. Anyway, it's DAD December, baby. Everybody have a very wonderful holiday out there. Merry Christmas to you, and we will see you very, very soon.